Hi there, and welcome to the Network Freestyle. I'm Malcolm Daren,
And I'm Daren Fulwell.
and we are the Network Freestylers. Today we're on Freestyle 108, which is our 8th episode, surprisingly. And today we're going to talk about the 5 design principles, specifically on the subject matter of security. We're going to talk about something that goes a bit beyond the traditional network security side of things, but I'll hand it over to Daren to give a little bit more of an insight as to what we're going to cover today. So over to you, mate.
Nice one, thanks, mate. As you rightly say, obviously continuing the series that we started with the looking into the blog post of the design principles that I was doing. Design principles, that hopefully we can use and feed into everything we've talked about across the series of shows we've done so far. We found, I think, and we noticed actually when we were doing the design of the data center stuff, last one, there was loads of bits, wasn't there, that were coming up, that are things that we'd already talked about on previous episodes. So it was really useful, I think, to.
I think that's the value of doing these design principle blogs, is because I think no matter for however long we do the Network Freestyle for, these 5 things will be like a current theme. We might not talk about them specifically in the context of how we're talking about them in your blog and these episodes, but there's no getting away with it from it that these come round in every single technology, every single design that you ever going to roll out. So really good initiative to get through these. So.
Well, it's a starting point, isn't it? So and like I say, common theme through everything we do. So let me just bring this up and see if we can get this one moving. Right, hopefully you should see a big white screen there. Have you got that?
Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay. So I mean, security is one of those things, isn't it, that when everybody does security courses and whatever, and they always talk about sort of three main themes. And I'm going to cover those just because everyone does. But we'll move on to why they're relevant and how in a minute. So first up, you've got, and I've got the wrong size pen, so we'll sort that one out. And I'll draw this one in red. Is confidentiality. Okay, this is it's a 3-letter acronym. Is CIA is an easy one to remember. That we typically worry about when we're talking about security. I stands for integrity, and we'll choose orange, I think. And A is for availability. Now that one sounds familiar. I think we've been there before, but we'll see how that's relevant from a security perspective in a minute. So confidentiality, obvious, right? This is about making sure that no one can see stuff or do stuff that they're not allowed to do, fundamentally, right? So it is that sort of visibility, it's accessibility. Anything else that we can think of with that one? Basically, what you're making sure there is that only the intended parties have access to or visibility of stuff protected in your network, right? So nice and straightforward, hopefully. Integrity is a little bit different, because essentially what you're doing there is making sure that the data and the services that are made available are actually the ones you think they are. The ones. So I guess an example would be that you might want to make sure that a file has been originated from the place that you expect it to, so that you can trust it, right? So it's about trust. I think is that fair? I think that's.
I think it's like getting what you expect to get, basically.
Yeah, so it's the trust really of trusted source, I suppose, of material, right? So the authenticity of that. So yeah, that's a good word. I'll write that down. And then obviously the availability. Well, we've already talked about what availability means from a network sense and why that's the key thing that we're trying to achieve here. But the availability of a service or of the data is kind of a protection as security again, right, of your environment and of the ensuring that service is available is an important part of the security of your data and of your environment as a whole, right? So it is a fairly obvious thing. Just making sure that the environment is there to be used. I don't really know what to write next to availability. What do you think?
I mean, I think like it's kind of like a result of something not being available, or sorry, a result of like a DDoS attack, for example, might mean that well, it might or might not, depending on what systems you've got in place to mitigate it, mean your systems are available.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think availability in regards to security, and we had a quick discussion about this episode before we started recording, and I never knew you actually had this slide in about the CIA.
Yeah.
One thing which might help put some context around availability in the security aspect is that the next, well, if we do an IoT or an industrial IoT discussion in the next one or one of the following up episodes, it's important to understand that like different types of networks, CIA, and in that order, is different in like an enterprise network. So confidentiality is probably the number one thing in an enterprise network, whereas in an IoT or an industrial network, availability is king.
Absolutely.
So availability, I don't know. I don't have an example. Something might come back as we talk through it, but it's an important point that everybody talks about CIA and the security principles. And I think, what's the most important thing? Well, I need to make sure that my data is confidential and it's not breached. Well, in an industrial network where there's potentially life at risk, and if a machine fails, it might result in injury or even death, then availability of the systems is more important. So that doesn't really answer your question, but
that's fair. Like, I think the main thing for me is that it's about just protecting the application. So the security, from a security perspective, it's about protecting the application and the environment that the application sits on, and making sure it's available, but also protecting the network and just making sure that the paths to that application are there. And
well, imagine the network wasn't available and the door entry system then didn't work, or somebody got locked in a room, or these are the types of things that I guess come down to like they branch into like the security side of things. Yeah. Just one very small example there.
No, but a completely valid one. So all good. So what I was going to do really, and we talked about this briefly. We'll see how this one works out. But I was going to go through and give kind of an analogy for the network and the environment, rather than just plow in and draw a network diagram, because it's hard to put all of the elements together that make up those things. And what we'll do is we'll look at the analogy and we'll flip back to the other slide and fill in some of the things we can do to ensure those principles are adhered to, if that makes sense. So let me see how this is going to work. This is freestyling in the extreme sense of the word. Mm-hmm. Okay, so imagine you have your company's crown jewels, right? In our case, we'll have some diamonds. Okay, will have why not put a crown in there, right? Let's see how we go with this. And we might have some really, really important documents, okay, with lots of important information.
Manuscripts and things like that on it. Yeah.
Okay?
With some manuscripts on it, by the looks of it, the way you've drawn that.
Well, in this case, yeah. In this case, maybe not, but once upon a time it might have looked that way, right?
Yeah.
And you keep all these things in a chest, let's say, and then that chest might be, well, you might keep it in your castle, right? Once upon a time, you'd have had a big castle like this, and let's just take that down a little bit. Okay, with a big main entrance, a portcullis there. We've got a drawbridge over a moat that runs around the castle, and you've got 2 guards on the door. Okay, with big nasty looking weapons. What an artist we are. Yeah, that's and these guys are protecting the environment and making sure that no one can get in, right? So as a bad actor might come to the door down here, we'll draw him in red. These guys might just turn him away and say, right, no, sorry, you're not coming in. Don't like the cut of your jib. You're not coming in. Nice and simple. They'll have rules as to who can and who can't come through the door, and it will be nice and straightforward. So think of that as your classic firewall that once upon a time in your network you'd have had that one point of entrance into your domain, and in order to get into there, they'd have to have come through the firewall at the outside, and with the portcullis behind there, you could say, well, maybe that's 2 layers of firewalls, and there's a bit of protection going on, okay, and there'd be archers behind all those windows as well, right? So plenty of security going on there, but at that one point of entrance. Now, obviously, in this day and age, networks aren't built with just one point of entry, okay? So we might have, and let me see if I can do this properly. I might have already tied myself in knots, but never mind. Let's imagine that this castle's a bit bigger and expands back there, and it might have the moat might go all the way around, and there might be other entrances. Let's draw one at the back here. So there might be a security guy back here as well, who's looking after things back there. And then he's also repelling these bad actors. You've got guys, people coming in from the other side here. And then you might have the same coming from the side here and from here as well, maybe, let's say. And we'll draw.
And just while you're doing that back door, right?
Yeah.
In this day and age, that can appear with no guard as a result of what we call shadow IT. And shadow IT is, where people basically put their own solutions in, I think is probably the easiest way. So for example, let's say public cloud solution is not approved by business, but somebody has a credit card, right? So they can just go and use it if it's not locked down.
That's it.
I'm not saying that a cloud provider, but that a cloud provider could be a backdoor. It could be an ADSL link that somebody's put in and plugged into the network in VLAN 1 just to get something working, etc., etc. But yeah, the concept is all of these entrances you want to be secured, but the reality of it is the larger your organisation, it might be more difficult to control that unless you're on the ball.
Well, this is exactly what I was thinking. Was that these guys might parachute in from the clouds, right? That was kind of where I was going with that one. So, but yeah, I like it. It's there you go. So your shadow IT guys just dropping in from all over the place. Obviously, there are people that you're allowed in, and so these guys might be might be colour those green maybe, who are allowed to get through here. But they might include, for example, people bringing supplies into the building, right? In this case, and they might have a cart there with a horse. Let's see if I can draw myself a little horse here. Yeah, well, that's vaguely horse-like. But what happens if there's a guy hiding in the cart and he's a bad actor? You know, and you've got to be able to spot these guys, right, as they're coming in. You know, this is starting to get a bit difficult now because you've got 4 sets of doors here and 4 different sets of guards who may or may not be talking to each other and may or may not be letting the same people through the gates. You know, what happens if someone comes in, they're a little bit like, you're not sure, you know, they're not green, but they're not red. You know, what do you do with those? Do you let them in or do you not? Some people might let them in.
I think another point to raise though as well is like, obviously what we're building up here is like a lot of complexity to manage and to be able to actually identify issues in the first place. But one of the other things that's kind of like a parallel here is throwing more people at it. Like it gets to an extent where, you know, it's too difficult for like humans to actually just be put there to spot intruders. Whereas, like, you know, maybe back in the day you would have somebody watching the logs 24/7. Now everything has to, like, because there's so many different iterations as to how you can be attacked, it has to be put into some sort of system or group of systems or an ecosystem, I guess, a security ecosystem where there's multiple different ways to spot multiple different types of attacks. But I'll hand that back over to you.
No, I mean that's exactly the point here, right? What, like you say, this is a scale problem, right? Because now you've got loads and loads of people here trying to get in, and these poor guys on the doors here, what do? You know, they're really struggling to keep up with what's going on here. Obviously, the other thing you need to think about is keeping an eye on this. You know, not just having those guys there, but also people who are trying to, I don't know, maybe trying to scale the walls, who are sort of kind of out of the way here. You know, you might have someone putting a ladder up and trying to climb the ladder and get over, and then you need people sitting up here on the turrets, keeping an eye out, making sure that they've got that oversight of everything that's going on. You can see this is going to become complex, right? Now, obviously, you can then take that further and say, well, what happens if you've got a number of these locations and you're trying to move some of these crown jewels from one place to another? You know, how do you protect them while they're on the move, as well as being here in the building? Would you lock down the trunk here, right? To sort of double protect things that are going on in here, and so have multiple trunks that some people are allowed access to and some people aren't. All of these kind of elements kind of build up, don't they? And like you say, it's layer on layer on layer of security here that you're trying to apply and protect against all kinds of weird unknown stuff that's going on. So really, really important to look at the whole picture and understand it all, because we need to think about, well, a number of different elements. I'll go back to the other slide, and what we'll do is we'll start to fill in some of the gaps here. Okay, so let's zoom that back out again. So thinking about then the confidentiality, I mean, it is, like you said before, it's probably the most obvious thing from a security perspective, but there are a number of elements of things that we can do to provide that confidentiality, right? So if we're talking about, yeah, thanks for that. Gosh, amazing. So, you know, if we're talking about the visibility and accessibility of those crown jewels, what are we going to do here? Well, first up, we need some sort of access control, right, to those crown jewels, and that might be, you might be thinking of that in terms of access to the network or to the data itself, right? It may be that the data is stored in a particular place and you've got access to that data and you can password protect it, let's say, whatever that is. But from a network perspective, what you're looking at there is making sure that someone who enters into the network, you already know that they're allowed to be there, yeah, in that form. You've also obviously got that the opportunity here to do some segmentation, right? Now, in our drawing before, the segmentation might be it might be the trunk in the middle, right? You might have another different coloured trunk, let's say a brown one over here that has some different stuff in it, and people only have access to it if they're allowed in, and so you're bundling up a load of stuff and putting it in a box that no one has access to unless they're allowed to, yeah. So that's where this sort of idea.
Put some context around that then. So
yeah.
That could potentially be like an extranet type access or something like that. So you're allowed in from the outside, but only with like sort of very limited access to that chest, I guess, and not access to. So that might be a third party or something coming in via an extranet to access, like, I don't know, like a SharePoint site or something like that. But they're not allowed to the part of the SharePoint that actually belongs to the organisation. I don't know.
Another example might be PCI, right? Certain people are allowed access to services that are required to be PCI compliant, and so there may be different rules of access allowed to different segments in the network or different elements. You know, in our case, there maybe someone has to write down that they've had the key, so that allows them to get into that trunk or whatever, and you've got different rules for different segments. So the segmentation obviously plays an important part, but it only makes sense if you've got some level of access control built around it, because otherwise it's just putting things in a different place, right? So
an access control that could be based on like so it doesn't always have to be coming from outside the network. It could be like inside the network, so that you're looking at 802.1x potentially wired or wireless, and that's with or without 802.1x. If you take it away slightly from the network layer, you talk about like configuring your network devices to authenticate against back-end directory services. So that could be the internal corporate Active Directory, for example, or it could be a dedicated Active Directory for a very specific purpose, i.e. third parties, machines, like, because again, don't want to go too much into that today because we've got an episode on it, but IoT type environments typically have their own Active Directory. And that's partly to do with having like what we call a CMDB, so Configuration Management Database, an ITIL term, but it's basically about knowing what's on your network, because if I'm the Windows Server Administrator and you join my organisation, I say, Darren, here's your username and your password, but what about the machine side of things?
Yeah.
Like, a machine isn't a person, but you still need to know who it is. Yeah, so you might have
because and again, it comes. I'm not going to be one to bash the BYOD thing, but it does come to that thing of, right, okay, I'm allowed to access certain things if I'm using this type of machine, but only that type of thing if I'm accessing with that type of machine. You think of in hospitals, for example, with a clinician wandering around with his iPad is allowed to see all the imaging databases and all the rest of it. But someone sat at the reception desk will only be allowed to access the systems that they've got visibility of, whoever it is, because of the nature of the location, but also the type of machine it is that they're using to access. So, important.
And a term that I've heard over the years about this sort of thing is so this is more around like the access control to the data on a need to know basis. So need to know. So that means like that's why if you're a network a junior network administrator, you might have access that's a silly example, but you know what I mean. Like, I need to know, is it like you're not given a, when I get set up your Windows password, for example, you're a network admin, right? So I'm not going to give you like domain administrator access so that you can blow up all the Active Directory servers. And the same goes for network devices, same goes for data. You're given access on a need to know basis, which ties in and makes the stuff that you can't get access to confidential from you. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I suppose the other part of that is encryption, right? So when stuff is stored in a certain way, to hide, to keep it confidential and make sure that it's not visible to the wrong people without the ability to access it. If it's kept encrypted, then you're obviously keeping it obfuscated from anyone trying to get in and access it who shouldn't be accessing it. So there's a few different things there, and I suppose what they all boil down to, and I'll move that down. I'm going to have to move it down a little bit further again. Is that what you're after doing is deploying a security policy, what's the word I'm looking for? It will come to me, but essentially an overarching policy that defines all of those things and makes sure that the right people have the right access to the right things, and that the wrong people don't have any access to those things. And it's done by segmenting the things up into groups or whatever, and then wrapping round access control really around those things. So fundamentally, that's really where confidentiality, why confidentiality forms such a big part of what we do, because it's what we can do in the network to make this stuff happen. In the grand scheme of things, what you want to do with any policy, I suppose, from a network service perspective, but certainly from a security perspective, is push those policies out as far as you can towards the endpoints, right? So in a perfect world, what you'd have is all of that policy enforced on all the endpoints that join the network. But the problem is that you don't have access to all those endpoints. And this is, certainly in the modern network, this is now a situation where, yes, you've got the wireless network, yes, you've got the wired network, and you've got control over those. But if you've got third parties coming in, as you've already mentioned, if you've got people joining public networks and being able to access your services, you don't have control on those endpoints. And so that's where you have to wrap the access control around your endpoints.
Those pesky contractors as well, you know. What can you do about them?
Yeah, well, there's not much we can do about you. Sorry, mate. What can I say?
There you go. But no, my point is, like, you know, a contractor needs to be, or a consultant, if they need access via their own PC, whether they've got a PC or a laptop from the company, they still need to be like, that's just an example of an internal person who's got good intentions, that still needs to be controlled as to what they can do. So
this is the point, though, isn't it? Because to some extent, you can trust someone. I suppose in this day and age, you can trust people so far, right? And certainly when you look at some of the state actors, these days, who basically they try and put people within companies to do this kind of industrial espionage and all that sort of thing. You've got to weigh up as an organisation whether you trust people or not, and how far you trust them. And if you use the right mechanisms, what you can do, and you've already mentioned this about tying the identity of people as they enter your network to your Active Directory or your organisational directory service, you're able to identify people and get people to take responsibility for their actions, I suppose, by giving them a password. That thing, if you tie all that together with your security policy, you're only doing things in one place, but you're also being able to set those as organizational wide policies, right? So, that kind of stuff's really, really key, I think.
And one of the other, yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things so it was about 2007, late 2017, that I left like the integrator space. But what I was seeing, like, a massive uplift in certainly interest in, it was always just something that cost more money before, but data loss prevention systems.
Yeah.
So that would be like, USB ports getting locked down has been a thing for years and years and years. But the reality of it is people would just ask for an exception and then they would be able to use the USB sticks. Now the USB sticks and all that are open, but there's endpoint software or there's network software, and it's not just USB sticks. It's private email. So you could like, this is about confidentiality, keeping the the data around the organization within the organization. So on your own systems. So you can't. It used to be that people might say, well, I can't use USB sticks because they've disabled the ports. So what I'll do is, not me, other people would potentially say, because these were the types of issues that we used to get customers coming to us about when I worked at various different partners, was how do I stop people emailing from their Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo account or whatever, just sending themselves an email not from their work email, logging onto the web interface, going to, just an example, gmail.com, emailing a document out to themselves at gmail.com. How do you track that? And you can track it with DLP systems.
Yeah. That comes again, doesn't it, to managing the endpoints really, and making sure that enforcement point is as far out as it possibly can be.
Yeah, endpoints and proxies, but that's getting into like specific solutions.
No, but the point is,
it used to just be something that people used to talk about and probably put in the security policy. Now it's real. Companies are doing this, and I've heard of cases where people have actually done that and emailed they've been about to leave a job, and they've emailed a load of documents to themselves, and they've been caught because there's a system, and they thought like going via a Gmail account or a Hotmail account or a Yahoo account bypasses the systems, but it still has to go through, as I say, like the proxy server. So a word of warning, if anyone's ever thinking about doing that, don't because technology's moved on and you'll get caught. So but it's and quite rightly so, because everybody knows that the data that is owned by a company, whether it's something that you created or not, it's owned by the company. It's in everybody's contract. It has been since day dot, and it will be until the end of time. But now there's ways to actually identify if data is leaving the organisation, and that plays into confidentiality in a big way.
Totally, and across the whole thing, and we'll come to that in a minute actually, because one of the things we want to talk about is stuff that stretches across all of these things and all across all areas. But we'll come to that in a sec. So I think that's kind of, from a confidentiality point of view, I think we've ticked most of the boxes there. We talked briefly about encryption and things like that, but encryption plays into the next thing I wanted to talk about as well, in terms of integrity, because when you're talking about the being able to trust the source of things and being able to validate the authenticity of the information you're receiving or the application you're running or whatever, typically what that means is these things have a certificate, right? Or they have a hashing algorithm associated with them that allows you to verify that what you're receiving is genuine, right? So I'm just going to scribble that down here. So and in reality, what that is encryption of sorts. Certainly on the certificate side of things, it's that whole public key encryption idea, where you have a public key and a private key. Your public key is used to encrypt stuff, and the only thing that can your private key, you encrypt stuff with your private key, you can decrypt it with your public key, and vice versa. So you can always confirm that things have come from the right place in that sense. And then, of course, you have a hashing algorithms whereby you can publish, if you're publishing data or files or whatever, you can publish a hash of those things so that people can verify that the document or the data they receive is the same as the original one as it was intended. So pretty simple in that sense, but key to verifying that what you see is what you get, I suppose. Any other thoughts on that one, Malcolm? I mean, it's pretty key on when you're building VPN sort of environments and that sort of stuff, that you can verify the integrity, but it's all part of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually know this subject, to be honest. Well, not that I don't know it that well, but I don't know it as well as other things. So we pre-shared keys and stuff fall under the category, and like hashing algorithms, like, so is that like MD5, AES, encryption, SHA?
I think all of these things kind of build it, and like I say, encryption kind of, for me, kind of sits across both confidentiality and integrity for that reason, because they're quite closely interwoven, really, because it is about saying, yes, this is secret because I've encrypted it, but it's also I can verify that it has come from the right source, because if I use the right key to decrypt it, then I get the right information back. So I think it is, like I say, the two things are interwoven, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So is there much more to say about integrity? I mean, no, I don't think so. But by all means, if anyone has any other ideas, I could do with some education on that one by the look of it. So yeah. Availability. We talked at length about network availability previously, but obviously, and you mentioned earlier, Mal, the main thing there really is around the idea of denial of service, right? So this is where maliciously somebody actively makes either changes to the network or has access to data they shouldn't, in order to stop people accessing the data or services that they need to across the network. Yeah, I think that's fair. That could be through the infrastructure itself, so the servers and the data stores. It could be on the network, obviously, and it can be intentional, but it may not be. It may be that it's done by mistake. But the point there is, what you need to be in a position to do from a network perspective is make sure that you're protecting against this sort of stuff happening, right? So I mean, there are loads and loads of ways that you can protect against denial of service attack, right?
I mean, here's a blast from the past, but I remember there was an article in Network World from like way back. It must be 10 plus years ago. I won't mention the specific case because I don't know the detail, but there was a case about a network administrator who basically, I don't know exactly what they'd done, but anyway, they'd done something to the entire network, which was a big network. They got sacked or fired. They got lost their job, and the day that they done it, they basically done something to the whole network and then changed all the passwords.
Amazing.
It isn't funny, but
No.
things have come up. It's probably before. It was when people used if we can find a link and it's a genuine link, we'll put it in the show notes. But
yeah,
it was quite a well-known case, and the guy got quite a long time in jail and stuff like that. But that's definitely an availability thing, and that's just around when good practice. Most people who leave an organisation, even if they're fired, resigned, whatever, went on a sabbatical, whatever, 99.99% of people aren't going to do something like that. But that's, that if someone's got all the passwords, or you hear about things like a lot of the attacks that happen these days, people breach a part of the infrastructure and they sit there for 2, 3, 4 years before they actually launch an attack. So obviously the attack is a part where it brings the availability down, it links into the other two areas where how did someone
and
get into
I think it's important that you realise that all of these things are interwoven, right? And we'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, what we're talking about with the availability is that thing of creating a scenario where you're either using all the resource that's available, so you're stopping other things using that resource, you're actually taking things down, taking things down. It's those kinds of things we're trying to protect against. So you might choose, for example, if you're worried about creating too much traffic in the network, then you'd be looking at things like QoS policies and things like that to limit the amount of traffic that's available to certain types of bandwidth available to certain types of traffic. If you are using a certain type of switching platform, you may look at how to protect your control plane through control plane protection or policing. It's those kinds of elements.
Yeah. I guess the example that I gave there, the guy changing the passwords, I guess the point I was trying to make there was availability or lack of it could be caused by a very involved and complex denial of service attack.
Yeah.
Or it could be from someone with a motive to change the passwords, or it could be someone with a motive to go and cut the cables in the data center.
It's a good shout.
I was just reminded of that because I've seen a thing on LinkedIn the other day, which actually that jogged my memory about the guy changing all the passwords. But there was a picture, you've probably seen it, where it's just the ends of the Ethernet cables,
yes.
and it's a catchphrase that says why you should change or revoke access, or why you should lock your fired network administrator out of like the comms room after they're fired or something like that. And it was a picture of like a switch where he went in and just cut all the cables, and he or she or the person had gone in and cut all the cables. So yeah, it just reminded me.
Fundamentally, that's a denial of service attack, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, even down to that physical security, that there's, it's important to track all of these things through. Actually, that's quite neat, because that leads on to the next thing I wanted to say. Really, is that that all of these things could relate to configuration or whatever. But they also relate to the physicals. They also relate to access control and all of that good stuff. Sorry, Arsenal have just scored. Apologies, mate. It's one on the side there.
Have they scored to go ahead or come back from being behind?
It's Aaron Ramsey's put one up. We're one up against Newcastle, which is.
Oh well, he'll be at Juventus next year, so.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, cheers. Well, we've got to use him while we can, right?
That's it.
So yeah, like to the point I'm making, I suppose, is that this whole story, this is a defense in depth story, right? So this is about making sure that you're using every level of defense that you've got to address all of those areas, right? So you're not just talking about a firewall. You're not just talking about doing some endpoint protection, but you're talking about the physical stuff, about locking people in and out. You're talking about logging people, making sure that they that you know who is where and what they're doing. It's as much about visibility, right? We talked before about the watchtowers looking over the over the fort. Those guys have to see everything that's going on, and how do you make sure they've got that right visibility? Do you install CCTV cameras everywhere? Do you use a bit of machine learning to track people's faces as they're walking through the buildings? All of that works as part of the security of your environment. So it's important not to just put your trust in some firewalls. That's kind of where this is going. And really, that's the point of all of today's freestyle, right? Is about saying, look, this bloody complicated. There's a lot to it, and you have to be considerate of the whole thing from end to end. And it's a distributed thing. It's not going to sit in one place. You need to worry about your endpoints. You need to worry about your access to your network. You need to be concerned about encrypting stuff. You need to be worried about how you handle VPNs and bring traffic from outside your network in. You need to be concerned about when that traffic is in motion and when it's at rest. What do you do with it once it's actually landed? You segment it, you put control around it, but also, if you're sort of really sort of architecting this thing end to end, you need to think about, right, okay, once it's on the storage, how does it look there? How do I control access to it, and so on.
I mean, one of the things, again, not like we are multi-vendor in our discussions, but
of course,
we've said before, we obviously come from a strong Cisco background, and one of the best sort of things that I think Cisco have done, it might be marketing, but it's factual as well, is the before, during, after attack continuum.
Yeah.
That, for me, like when I was getting more and more into the advanced products, and once I learned about the Cisco ones, I started learning about the ones that were available, the equivalents from other vendors as well, and they've all got the same kind of methodology. So before is like, you can see someone, if you put the picture of the castle back up.
Yeah. So
think of this before, during, and after, just in general terms, rather than like the Cisco product portfolio. But the before, right, are like the guys down, the guy like the red and the yellow ones trying to get into the front door, and you see them hammering at the door or fighting with the guards, and then you see it in the logs, and that's before they actually get in. Or is that during? I guess that would be, you would see it during the attack. I'm making this up on the fly, so
good.
Right, so I'm trying to give examples, right? And then there's like during might be like you catch a virus spreading and like throughout your network, and then you're like, right, well, we can mitigate that by pressing a button here. Something similar, like I done a D-Cloud lab. I don't know if it's still going, but it was called Rapid Threat Containment. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
It was integrated, so it was basically say if you breached the network. So this is during. So a good example of that on a slightly different tack could be so let's say something gets into your network. Let's say somebody sends an email. It gets through the email system. You don't have any sort of email scanning, and somebody double clicks the link. But you do have advanced malware protection, regardless of vendor, on your network firewall. So a user double clicks the malicious file. It kicks off a command and control call out of your network, but then your firewall will notice that that's going to like some place with a bad geolocation tag or whatever, and then it'll stop it. So that's like during.
Yeah.
And then and that's done that before it gets. So it's during the attack.
Yeah.
Or a DDoS mitigation. Let's say someone's trying to bring your network down and fill up your internet pipes, and your cloud DDoS scrubbing service stops it. So that's stopping it during. And then so before chapping on the door, during something's in action, but you're able to mitigate it. So it could be that example, or it could be a client with a virus gets onto the network somehow. Let's say I'm a remote worker, and then I've picked up a virus somehow. I've not got the latest like patches on my PC. Come into the corporate network, and then like it's flagged up somehow via the security systems, and then I'm put into a quarantine zone. Or it might be that my antivirus definitions are not up to date. So I'm put into a quarantine zone. My virus definitions are updated, and then my laptop is cleaned, and then the during is now like scrubbed. The after, or that could maybe qualify as an after as well. I guess it's like if you're just sitting on your network and then you're infected, then what do you do?
Yeah.
Because by then, in the olden days, my first job was an IT support engineer, and the after in the olden days was getting every single PC on the network back to the mothership where the IT support desk was.
Yeah.
Plus getting field engineers to visit sites, and any that had like old antivirus definitions, clean the PC, get the malware off it, get whatever off it. So yeah, I thinking of that more as a concept, rather than like a product placement thing.
Nice.
I think is a really good analogy, and it helped me understand the products from multiple different vendors and what the point of them was. Because
and
if you just make a product
them, right?
and you can't give an example as to how it's going to help you, then you're never going to sell it.
No.
So that really helped me. So.
No, I think it's a good shout. Like you say, it gives you the understanding and the awareness of how to compare the different products as well for your own use, right? So being able to consider, right, okay, I know that this product will, there's a database out in the cloud that I can go and refer to, whereby it will update my product to say, right, yeah, here's all the latest attack vectors, this is what they look like, and this is the points at which you're able to do something about it.
And the other thing, the wee horse and carriage that you've got on the right hand side with the red guy, that red bad actor might get in undetected.
Absolutely.
But they might get out undetected with some stuff. So it's not just and that's the after. So once that what looks like a good horse and carriage gets into your castle, that's when you have to start thinking about, well, what happens now? Because you're either going to get infected or there's going to be data loss at a very high level.
And that's the visibility and the defense in depth, right? Because then you're able to turn around and say, well, look, what looks like good citizen behavior inside my network, what should that be? And if something sort of strays outside that, what do I do, right? So you might, for example, take traffic flow data from across your network and into a central point, analyze it and understand, right, okay, this looks good, this looks bad. If something looks bad, what do I do with it? You know, can you integrate that with your access control method so that if someone behaves badly, you can kick them off the network before they have the opportunity to extract a load of data that they're not permitted to do. You know, it's those kinds of things that you need to be considering, right?
And I was actually, when I started getting more into, like, because I'd done quite a lot of security stuff where I was before, and really got into like the DLP type products, and I was amazed at what sort of things it could pick up. So some of the demos and stuff that I'd done, it was like picking up if somebody, you can set policies that if you can detect somebody emailing social security number, even if it's just an Excel spreadsheet, you can pick up if somebody's sending out like credit card numbers, social security numbers, any sort of confidential type information like that can be picked up, even if it's just text in a spreadsheet. I thought that was amazing. Like,
but then you can do a couple of different things with that as well, depending on your policy, right? What you can do is you can say, right, actually bin that, don't allow it to happen, or you can obfuscate it and just say, right, anyone who does send that stuff out may have a valid reason to do so, but just blank it all out, or put X's in place or whatever, so that information is of no use to anyone who once it arrives who doesn't need to see it. So
yeah,
and again, it's that whole thing of, I suppose, going back to the list here, the biggest thing that when you're going through this process is to define what you need that policy to be, right? In all terms, think about the cases you're trying to protect against, how you're trying to protect your data, how you're trying to protect your service. But you've got to understand the way that people use the environment, the way that people use the services in order to make that work.
Absolutely.
Cool. Any more to add? I think we've covered that quite well there.
Yeah, I think that was good.
Okay, cool. Well, as usual, everybody who's watched this far, any comments, corrections, criticisms, welcome. You know where we are, at Net Freestyle on Twitter. You can email us, networkfreestylers@gmail.com, or leave comments on the YouTube or on the blog at networkfreestyle.tech. And we, as always, really look forward to hearing what you have to say. We've had some cracking feedback over recent weeks. It's been really, really good to hear. And hopefully it helps us just get better and better. So thank you for watching.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Speak to you soon. Thanks, Daren.
No worries, man.